participate, as well as agendas, minutes, and recordings, can be found on Broomfield's website at broomfield.org/council meetings. Kateria Beta, Broomfield's Director of Information Technologies, is present this evening and available for questions. If questions come up later, they can be emailed to info@broomfield.org. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name, neighborhood, and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. If you'd like to speak on more than one item on tonight's agenda, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1 minute. For our hearing impaired residents present, we have wireless headsets available through our AV team in the back of the council chambers. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. Councilmember Henkel is excused and council members Delgadillo, Marsh-Holshan, and Ward are attending remotely. A quorum of the council is present. Will everyone please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time on an item, they should limit their communications to 2 minutes. We'll plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for a meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Seeing none, are there any objections to this agenda being approved? The agenda is approved. There are no items under petitions and communications this evening. Council member reports are next. And before I turn it over to my colleagues, I would like to take a moment to announce that the City and County of Broomfield is proud to be a host location for Broomfield Fish's current food drive, Love Your Neighbor. Through the end of February, Broomfield City Council and staff invite all of our residents to help collect food and personal care items for our neighbors in need. To learn more about the Love Your Neighbor food drive, please see the poster in the lobby or visit broomfield.org. Does any member of council have any reports or updates tonight? Councilmember Leslie.
This isn't a report, this is a compliment. Saturday, a week ago when we had the last snowfall, I was walking my dogs about 9 o'clock at night, and one of the city snow plows was coming down the street, and he couldn't see me because I was wearing a dark coat and it was dark. And suddenly he realized I was there and he slowed very quickly, but he had to pass me in order to stop, kind of like a railroad train. And then he backed up and he opened his window and he yelled at me, "I'm sorry." And I yelled back, "No, you did great." Because the spray was just going way over the sidewalk from the momentum that he was carrying. So I just want to compliment the team for the customer approach that he took. He didn't have to stop. He could have just barreled right on through and not thought twice about it. But he made the point to stop, apologize unnecessarily, and then to go back to his work. So I needed to say that to everybody, and maybe somebody could find out who it was on Anthem Ranch Road at 9 o'clock at night that Saturday. Yeah, thanks.
GPS is a wonderful thing for just this reason.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor Castriotta provided the State of the City address this last week at the Chamber annual meeting, which was full of great information. So thank you, Mayor, for that presentation. This last week, we had the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport Community Noise Roundtable. The final report from the consultant was postponed, so we did not hear that report, nor did we have any conversations about what's next. So hopefully this will occur in March. The Rocky Flat Stewardship Council met this last week. Much of the conversation centered around the need for the board to look and discuss how this organization continues, adapting to the realities of post remediation of Rocky Flat site and the purpose of the Stewardship Council. So a subcommittee has been formed to allow for the selection of a facilitator to meet with the Stewardship Council to discuss what is going to be next. I volunteered to be a part of that subcommittee, and our first meeting will likely happen later in February. And lastly, the Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority will have a virtual only meeting later this month on the 20th at 3 p.m. And on that agenda is our long-awaited Brimfield Witjaw from the Parkway. So that happens later this month. So that's all I have to report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Marsh Holshan.
Thank you, Mayor. I am greetings from Washington, D.C. I'm in DC this week attending the National Association of Counties Conference. I will have a full report, written report submitted after I get back. One thing I wanted to note was a conversation we had with our Representative Brittany Pedersen regarding congressional direct spendings. And the conversation was related around our sidewalks and the ones in Broomfield that are non-ADA accessible, and the potential maybe in the future of looking at submitting those through the congressional direct spending avenue for potential funding opportunities. So something we can explore. I'll have a full report, as I said, when I get back. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, sorry, Councilmember Lim.
Thank you. This morning I attended the first event of 2024 for the Chamber Coffee and Conversation. The Chamber holds this on the second Tuesday morning at Ziggy's on 120th from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And the plan is for this year to have a council member attend those monthly events. So thank you to those who were able to attend, and I was glad I got to speak with everyone, and looking forward to council continuing with this in the year.
Thank you. Any other council member updates or reports? Seeing none, thank you. We'll move on. We'll now continue with public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on matters other than the items already listed on tonight's agenda. If there's anyone who would like to be heard, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Win Eberhard. Been a long time since I've come to a council meeting, so it's a good experience. I live in Gayton Green, Ward 3, and I've been a resident of Broomfield for about 44 years. And so it's a great town. My comments relate to the Broomfield Town Center. A couple of items I'd like to bring up as a matter of process. I went on the website, did not find much. The plat view I found dates to 2008. So I'd ask that maybe the staff would update what's going on with Broomfield Town Center. My 2 points were First Bank Center and also the Flatirons Mall. There's some lessons to be learned. Even though Flatirons Mall was quite successful, there was three major errors. One is the shuttle didn't work, wasn't very useful. The second point was that it was overbuilt for retail, as we now see apartments going up in a lot of places. And then there was a problem too with the engineering in the one open center where they had to tear it down. So my recommendation is, and hopefully you're already doing this, is not only do you use staff and engineering that you, in this whole development project, that you hire a consultant who has expertise and a good track record as a consultant to be sure that they're checking everything is planned and going on, and that we don't have mistakes made like in those other two situations. And so thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for coming in. Would anyone else like to be heard during general public comments? Please come up to the podium.
Hi, my name is Janet Sund. I've lived here since I was born in 1961. First filing, I currently live in Westlake in Ward 5. And we had a incident, I think about 2 weeks ago with a gas line break. And I'm a construction estimator, commercial construction estimator. And I looked up the code requirements and I looked up the types of materials that were probably used to put in the gas line back when that was built in the mid-70s. And it's metal piping. And there's a whole bunch of history throughout the United States of that metal piping failing. And this pipe, according to the Excel engineer that was on this site, had a hole this big in that gas line, which is unheard of. And they did not come by and tell any of the neighbors. It happened right at a crossing, and I live one house back from the houses that were on the corner, right next to the path that goes up to the Westlake Middle School. And from what I've investigated, I have not been told that the Westlake Middle School was told about the gas leak. For one, the neighbors were not contacted. I found out about it by going outside and seeing that there was a bunch of work going on. The fire department was just probably 70 feet or 50 feet from my house, if that. And they had blocked the roads off by me. And I went down and I had to find out by going down and talking to the people. There should have been a warning going out. There should have been someone coming around and talking to the neighbors about it. You know, there could have been a bad incident happen and nobody said anything to anybody. I fortunately had most of the neighbors on that street in my contact list. So I just created a mass text message and sent it out to everybody. But that's how everybody kept up. There's neighbors that have severe illnesses that would have had a lot of trouble getting out of their house had they had to just leave. And then they went around and they blocked off by the school. And then that created all kinds of mess with, that's a street that goes up to the middle school for the buses. And it was a total mess. And I think it should have been handled different. I think there should have been more communication to the residents. I mean, that could have been a catastrophe. And the piping, they said it was a metal pipe and it just fell apart. It had a big hole in it. And the streets, the potholes on our streets have, they've patched a few of them, but for years they haven't went by and patched them. So if you think about it, if it's rusting out, the water is seeping in through the holes and the cracks and the potholes. It's going down into the ground. That piping is only about, what, 42 inches, 3 feet deep? So the water's going down there and corroding it. How many other times is this going to happen? I mean, this can't be the first time. There's incidents after incidents after incidents across the United States that these have had catastrophes. So I think there needs to be something put in place for more alertness to the neighborhood.
No, I appreciate you coming in to make that statement, Janet. And that incident did prompt a meeting with Excel, and there's been some feedback changes. If City Manager Hoffman wants to address that.
We appreciate you coming down. Director Rutt is in the back, who participated in the debrief with Excel 2 days after. And happy to have the conversation with you for additional information. Without getting too technical, there's a difference between a gas leak and a gas line break. The ascertaining where the gas is, whether it's a water line or in the sewer line, happens expeditiously, and then that drives the level of communication in that neighborhood. So when it is a gas leak and it's in the water line, if it's in the sewer line, FYI, very different circumstance. It's an all hands on deck. When we're able to ascertain that it's in the water line, we do shut off. So we can do a shut off from valve to valve. And that's what happened in this particular case. So again, the speed with which we ascertain and work in partnership with Excel is why we had the follow-up conversation. If we can't get Excel on our very first call, that's a problem. So we have a plan B and a plan C during that debrief, but Mr. Rudd is happy to speak more on the technical nature before and after, and kind of what your questions were with regard to corroding pipes due to the water.
Janet, Mr. Rutt is the person you really should talk to, and he can help give you the debrief. Mr. Rutt? Perfect. Thank you. All right, and thank you, Manager Hoffman. Any other public comment? Come on up to the podium, please.
Hello, my name is Marty McReynolds, and I live at 1321 Birch Street. I'm speaking about the new development that has, I believe you're voting on today.
Right, and we will have public comment when we get to that agenda item. I apologize for
I
the
see.
confusion. This is for public comment that's not on the agenda. So if you want to wait and hold your comments
Okay.
at the proper
Is it
time.
likely to be very late? And I'm
Actually
saying
not.
this,
it's-
my husband just had surgery. I've left him alone at home. I really can't stay late.
Well, it is the first item after consent agenda, so it shouldn't
Thank
be
you.
too late, right? Can you wait another 20 minutes? Okay, thank you. All right. Next, under reports, staff is going to provide council with a legislative update.
Director of Strategic Initiatives, Danae Brouillard, is going to walk us through this item. Ms. Brouillard.
Well, thank you, Manager Hoffman. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Can I go ahead and get the slideshow up, please? As Curtis pulls that up, I can go ahead and get started. To kick us off, I just have a placeholder for each presentation of what to expect throughout the session, just because there's some consistent processes throughout as we're in kind of the storm, to remind what is there available for council and for the residents to know where we are in legislative efforts. As a reminder, we have the CCOB bill tracker with the tier 1 and tier 2 priorities. I think we've added a couple, which I'll talk about tonight, in a support position, but we've been actively monitoring about 30 right now in partnership with CCAT, CCI, CML, and MMC. So very busy already. Next slide, Curtis. Just a reminder for scheduled updates, we have the standing updates here at council meetings, and then we also have the tri-weekly virtual legislative updates. And I wanted to mention it because our next one was scheduled for Monday, and because of the holiday closure, it will be rescheduled to Thursday. It is all on the council calendar, but just a friendly reminder, Thursday from 12:30 to 1:30. We'll do written updates as we've continued to do. And then, as you know, Aponte Busam, our contract lobbyist, sends those on Tuesdays as well. And then just a reminder again that if we do miss something, please reach out and let us know. It is always helpful. But council can also initiate a request via Section 9 of your rules if desired. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, it went in the legislative update on Friday, but we have a schedule for a legislative dinner with Senator Winter and Representative Lindstedt. So as you all know, we do this every year during the session, and they are confirmed pending committee hearings, of course, but it should be a good evening. We'll extend the invite to teen council like we did last year. Mayor Castriata and Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf will be hosting, and just wanted to mention it in case you didn't see it on Friday. It is on the council calendar, and we hope that you all can join us for that that dinner and conversation. Next slide. Just a quick update, 450 bills as of like 5 minutes ago. So a lot dropped. It was a pretty hot Friday last week of several bills being introduced. I think the scary thing for me is many of the big bills that we've been spending a lot of time on have not been formally introduced yet. So the work is still to come for sure. Although there are some high impact bills that are already floating around. One thing I wanted to mention was the challenge of calendars, different chambers and the competing and supporting priorities. I thought of you all, council members, of that intersectionality or the collaboration of these different bills that are coming forward. They're running into challenges. For example, addressing transit-oriented communities. Well, you have a parking bill that hasn't been introduced yet in the other chamber, or addressing occupancy limits that are all trying to tackle some of the same issues, but with different chambers, different introduction dates, and that they're running into some complications. So today during the TOC conversation, we had said, well, what about the parking limits and how does this impact your formulas? And they said, oh, well, we're still trying to figure that out. So I just want to flag that we are looking at how all of these intersect, but it is a little challenging right now with bills in different stages and with different chambers. And then one thing I just wanted to mention for council's reference is every year there's a cigar festival held at the Omni. I think it's been an event that's gone on for many years. And there was some changes at the state level that impacted this event. So Representative Lindstedt has been working with those vendors to support a bill, and there is some language in there that addresses the cigar festival in Colorado. There are two issues. There's a state issue, and then for us, there's a local issue because we license them. And so they're addressing the state issue, but I just wanted to mention that since that event is in Broomfield, it has been concerns from the vendors in the past. And so although this bill's not written for Broomfield, we're not actively behind it, supporting it. We just, it is something that has impacted vendors in our community. So wanted to put it on your radar. All right, next slide. Let me open up my other tab as we get into the big bills. So local authority home rule 1024, I mentioned this a few weeks ago. I did want to mention, so this was that for governments that were debruised, having to go back to the ballot to get approval again, that was postponed indefinitely in the committee. So that one we no longer have to worry about. Moving on to transportation, we've talked about the RTD accountability bill. This is a big one as it will be sponsored by our own Senator Winter and Representative Lindstedt together. Today on a call, they said that they are very far behind in the drafting. We asked when we could see this bill and there wasn't a clear crystal ball on when that's coming. We are continuing to participate in the stakeholders, but did want to let you know that as of right now, we don't have an anticipated date of that actually being introduced. Senate Bill 36, the Vulnerable Road User Protection Enterprise. I had emailed about this a few weeks ago, and I know that there were some questions from council members, and so we wanted to loop back on this. It is an interesting bill where there is not consistent positions amongst our membership organizations. For example, CCI has taken a position of oppose. CCAT, I believe, is in support now. And the Metro Mayor or NWMCC is also in support. Where we are as in Broomfield is we're just going to continue to work on amending and monitoring that bill right now. Sarah Grant, our transportation director, is actively working with CDOT to continue to decrease the bureaucracy of the grant process so that we can have access to those funds. So just a reminder, it sets up an enterprise fund where on average, a Broomfield resident would pay about $4. It would be collected into a fund, and then that money would be reallocated for local or state highways, for local governments or CDOT to create protections for vulnerable road users. So essentially anybody outside of a car. So that's an update on that bill. 32, I'm not going to talk about, but I just wanted to flag because we talked about it prior, the methods to increase the use of transit. I think that was the first bill council took a support position on a few weeks ago, and that is moving through the process. And then the last one was Senate Bill 65. This was in Friday's update, which is the use of mobile electronic devices and driving a motor vehicle. As we know, distracted driving is the cause for many accidents on our roads. And so essentially this helps prevent distracted driving by holding a mobile device. And that one we sent out on Friday, and it has moved into a position of support. Next slide. Oh, housing, the theme of the session. So quite a few here just to mention. So the transit-oriented communities, or TOC, which now is called TOC Tuesday. I know Planning Director Burton Zeddy and I have been spending a lot of Tuesdays with the governor's office and the sponsors of the bill, including today. I think council would be happy to hear that the letter that we shared with you all last week that highlighted staff concerns from the bill kind of seemed to be the conversation today on the call. They addressed a lot of the administrative approval process and some of the concerns that we really had highlighted. There's a new draft bill that we were supposed to get right after that call. I haven't seen it yet. We're hopeful that it will translate into writing. So more to come. We just need a little time to digest those proposed changes. And did want to let you know we'll also be meeting with Senator Winter, who is a co-sponsor of the bill, this Friday as well, to share that feedback. The strategic growth bill we talked about, there were two and now there's one, so that's great. It's the Sustainable Affordable Housing Bill that came out of partnership with CML, and it talks about the housing studies and looking at housing affordability without land use or preemption. That one still has not been introduced, but is slowly making its way. Accessory dwelling units, we've talked about this one, we're still monitoring it. Essentially for Broomfield, it's a minimal impact because we already allow them. One thing we would have to change is the property owner having to live in the house. That would be a code change we'd have to do if it was to pass as currently written. And as of right now, it does still restrict HOAs from regulating them within their area. And I have not seen any amendment language to address that. So as is, that's still in the bill. Construction defects. So there's three here, and I hear a rumor now there's going to be a fourth one. And they have different philosophies of how to address construction defects. So the first one is the right to remedy, and that is really looking at the right to remedy between the developer and the actual contractor to keep it out of court cases, but to also speed things up so it doesn't impact the affordability. And then the construction defect action procedures, I haven't had time to read that one deeply. So staff right now is doing an analysis to see which one is more consistent with Broomfield's legislative principles, because they're taking two very different approaches to the same problem. So more to come on that one. And then the last one is the construction professional insurance coverage transparency. And that's the one that requires a study. So Rep. Wilford requesting a study to show that construction defects actually do cause affordability issues. There's some disagreement at the Capitol of if that's actually a concern or if it's the developers playing on a narrative. So limiting minimum parking requirements still has not been introduced, but we are watching for that. The prohibit residential occupancy limits, again, has minimal impact on Broomfield. We had concerns about group homes because it wasn't clear in the bill how that would apply for group homes. And there was an amendment from CML that addresses that we anticipate being amended into the bill. And the big thing to highlight there is it does take away local control, right? So again, although impact is small, it does take away some of that local decision making. And then the last one is the 1175, which is local government's right to property for affordable housing. I think I spoke about this briefly last time, but this is the right to first offer. And there's two parts this year. There's right to first offer and right to first refusal. And so essentially it allows local governments to, when a property goes up, to have those first steps before it goes out to market. Next slide. For DEI, we wanted to just mention two bills around access to public meetings. They are very heavy bills, and thank you to Attorney Rogers and her staff of looking into the practicality of them. We will have more information. We're still kind of diving into those with CML as well to see it's important work, accessibility, transparency, but also making sure that we can deliver on those expectations if it was passed. All right, environment and ozone, probably the other huge section of the legislature. So the air quality ozone levels, I just want to mention, that was kind of the first bill that came out. It's from Senator Kirkmeyer. It's a two-part bill, so it goes for high emitting vehicles. And the approach is that if you were to get pulled over because you're violating the emission standards in the non-attainment zone, which is Broomfield, and you can show that you have taken it in and tried to fix it, you can get an $850 voucher to help offset those costs to get your car in compliance. And then the second part is to have electric garden tools, and I think it goes up to $150. This one has just stalled. So we'll see where it goes. It was introduced about a month ago and it is just sitting in committee right now. So Senate Bill 92, we wanted to flag, it's the cost-effective energy codes. As you all know, as a council, every year, Planning Director Bertanzetti brings forward the energy codes. They're looking at making sure that they're feasible from a cost perspective. So essentially, this requires a study for them to look at these energy codes and look at how much it's going to cost to come into compliance, and then make a decision of if that's a worthy investment. So we're monitoring that one. The prohibit landscaping practices for water conservation, we're monitoring that one as well. I think the big thing to talk about here is there's a little bit of conflict between local control. They want to restrict what you can use in your municipalities. However, what they want to restrict is consistent with council's priorities of environmental and sustainability goals. And then the last four, I just wanted to put up here so council knows that we are monitoring. There are several draft bills we're waiting that are consistent with priorities from council in the past. So air quality permitting is a bill. We've seen some draft language, but it still has not been introduced. The CCUS, that's carbon capture and utilization storage. Talk about a dense bill to try to read, but we've got through it and have kind of highlighted what the impact is to Broomfield. That's supposed to be introduced in the next week. There's a pipeline safety bill we wanted to highlight for you all. As you know, we participated in the PUC rulemaking for safe around pipeline safety. And this is an important bill to take that to the next step that we have been monitoring and actively participating with Deputy Attorney Pat Gilbert. And then last but not least, as you've seen in the news, Hawkes Lewis is supposed to be introducing a bill around phasing out oil and gas in Colorado, I think by 2030. I haven't seen a draft of that bill, I'll be honest, so hopefully we'll get to see it soon, but we will actively monitor and analyze and share back with council. Next slide, that might be it. Oh no. Sorry, guys, just a few more. Health and Human Services, this one should be quick. Just want to highlight Children's Behavioral Health Statewide System of Care. You guys were in a support position consistent with, it's a priority bill for CCI, as well as 1038, which is the high acuity crisis for children, youth, and support, or for children and youth. And then you'll see up at the top is Senate Bill 22, regulate flavored tobacco products. This is one that sometimes I think it's going to be easy, and then we start, it was a cleanup bill, and if you've been following it, there's a lot of stories now how it's not a cleanup bill. But essentially it gives county commissioners or counties the ability to regulate flavored tobacco products. As a home rule county, just for your reference, we already have that ability to do that. So it doesn't impact Broomfield. And then last but not least, I'm not going to go through all of these, but the public safety and firearm bills, we know that this has been important. Council submitted a letter to the governor, I think it was in February of last year. But there are more gun bills than we anticipated this session, with the newest one being the one at the bottom, the prohibit carrying a firearm in sensitive spaces. So we're working with Chief Hempelman and Anea to kind of go, or Christina Pena-Helm to review these, and we'll provide a more robust update, but wanting to look at them in totality before we can do that. All right. Next slide, Curtis. Do I dare? Woo, that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bouillard. And I misspoke, Marty. So I thought it was going to be 20 minutes and I forgot we had this legislative item, which I anticipate there'll be many council questions. So I know you want to get back home to your husband. If you want to come give your public comment now, please do.
I really appreciate your inviting me to come speak out of turn, and thank you. And my husband will appreciate it too. Okay, I live at 1321 Birch. I'm within eyesight of the proposal for the proposed area. I fear that you cannot put a high density housing development in the middle of a low density residential area without affecting our property values. And for many, many people, That is their greatest asset. So this is not a small, it could potentially be a very large hit or negative impact on the neighbors who live closely in that area. It is something which is measurable. So from the sale prices of homes that occur once that is approved or begun or some point, you can determine whether those homes within the area are increasing in value relative to the rest of Broomfield or not. I mean, whether they are going at a same rate, either up or down, but are they staying relatively equal to where they are now? So it is something which could be measured and could be in some way tried to made up for. I do understand housing is a crisis. However, if it is only fixed by damaging other citizens, that's not fair either. So some way it needs to be that all the citizens of Broomfield are taking on this problem and are supporting those people who are near the areas where high density or low income or high density, low income, or whatever it is that the housing authority is putting in, you measure what's happening and you offset through property taxes or some other way for those people who are losing financially in this situation. And I don't know the answers, but it does feel very unfair if a small neighborhood gets all of the impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so now we're going to go to public comments on the legislative update. So if anyone would like to make any comments on the legislative update presentation, now would be the time. Ready online? No? Okay, we'll go to council comments and questions for the legislative piece. Councilmember Cohen.
I just have a quick question, and not to add to your labors, but I'm curious whether you're also following filings of initiatives on the ballot. I ask that only because of my other work in healthcare, we're seeing like the trial lawyers just dropped 2 initiatives that would have significant impact on healthcare in the state. I know there's some somewhat related to city government too, that are not on the ballot yet, but might be.
Councilmember Cohen, thank you for the question. There was actually an article we just talked about this morning, and that's a great suggestion. I'll try to add a note to my update to include those as well. That's great feedback.
All right, any other council member questions? No? Any online? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Bouillard. Thanks for being on top of all this. All right, council's consideration of the consent items are next. The clerk will read all of the consent items by title, and there'll be one opportunity for public comment and council questions. Will the clerk please read agenda items 6A through 6C by title?
6A, approval of minutes for the regular council meeting of January 23rd, 2024. 6B, resolution number 2024-04, approving an intergovernmental agreement with the Colorado Department of Transportation for the West 120th Avenue Complete Streets project. 6C, resolution number 2024-05, approving 2 permanent easements to Public Service Company of Colorado, Xcel Energy, for the purpose of installing electric vehicle chargers.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in person. If anyone would like to comment on these 3 items, please step up to the podium. Please say your name and neighborhood for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hello, Council, Mayor Pro Tem. My name is Peter Kraus, and I live in Eagle Trace North. And as it pertains to electrifying our society, there's a lot of trade-offs, and we need to be having full-throated conversations about what it means to be putting heavy batteries on the roads, the wear on the tires, and actually the lithium mining that goes on behind those batteries is extremely pretty extraordinary. I heard a piece on KGNU 88.5 Boulder, and I was pretty surprised at, I mean, I knew that the lithium mining was a pretty serious environmental degradation, and I was very surprised. So we know that we would like to conserve our gas and oil. We know that we would like to burn less gas and oil. We know that it would create less air pollution, and that's going to be good for our society. We have to be really careful about how we approach this move to electrification. I sense that there's a push to do it a little quicker than even the electric grid is ready to handle it. I'm not sure our infrastructure is really prepared for the amount of amps that need to be moved to electrify our society. So just as council addresses and deals with the issue of trying to move away from gas and oil, let's really try and measure the trade-offs between gas and oil and electricity and lithium, et cetera. And go for the low-hanging fruit, which is change the way we live, change the way we eat, and consume less in the first place. Thank you, council.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please.
Again, I'm Janet Sund. I live in Westlake. Being a commercial construction estimator, I worked on a project for the National Park Service this past summer, so in August. And they were trying to put in electrical vehicle charging stations into all the national parks. And we ran into a variety of problems. One, the building codes are not current for the fire protection. They have not updated the fire protection building codes, and they're not going to until they get around to it. And I can't remember when they're going to do that, but it hasn't occurred yet. And I found out by calling multiple jurisdictions throughout this Rocky Mountain region, and I ended up getting most of my information from our North Metro Fire Command Center. And I spoke to the senior officer there that was involved with the National Fire Protection Agency meetings. And he even sent me the transcript of the recent meeting on the fire protection codes. And one, they didn't want to even discuss it because it wasn't up yet for a couple of years. And two, there is nothing on the books currently for how they handle electrical vehicle battery fires. The information is not accurate. What they have in part of the codes is not sufficient. It doesn't take into account the veracity of the fires. They're putting in electrical vehicle charging stations because there aren't any codes in areas where there are combustible materials adjacent to them, like putting them next to gas stations. That's volatile. They're putting them next to, in the national parks, they were putting them next to fuel storage stations where they have a big gas tank for the fire service. And they have to have a containment. Well, they were putting an electrical vehicle charging station right up to the wall where the containment wall was. So if there had been a fire, it would have inflamed it. The other thing that the officer down here at the North Metro Fire told me, he said, when you put these electrical vehicles charging stations together, and they have the same parking width as all the other parking stalls, and they can, once, if a battery should ignite, they're all going to catch fire, whether it's a regular car or an electrical vehicle car. And I said, well, I didn't think of that. And he says, well, think of how they're building these cars nowadays. They're all plastics. The paint, it's just all going to combust, and you're going to ignite all these other cars. So it's a big hazard, and it's a big waste of money. And For instance,
Janet, your time has expired.
Okay.
So if you want to
Thank you.
wrap up your last comment, we got to move on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, now that was public comment. Does any council members have any questions or comments on these three items? All right. Oh, your button. The button's not working. Would you like me to call on you, Councilmember Lim? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Could staff please describe the location of these EV chargers in relation to the safety issues? Helpful.
Allison Harvey, who has a new title in Public Works. And we don't have a slide. So Ms. Harvey, please introduce yourself and your new title and talk a little bit about the safety, please.
All right. Hi, I'm Allison Harvey, Deputy Director of Public Works for Energy and Sustainability. Nice to see you all. And I didn't come up here with my computer, so I don't have the maps in front of me. That was a mistake, sorry. These chargers that we're talking about have been planned for a while. We received a grant to install them at the Brimfield Community Center and at the, here at this building. And we've been working with Excel and according to fire regulations and everything on exact siting. And so the safety considerations have been taken into account, as well as where we might potentially need to have charging for fleet vehicles in the future. And I don't have a specific answer, sorry, about the exact location, but it has been a process that is being very carefully looked at with all kinds of professionals, including the safety professionals.
Ms. Harvey, phone a friend is right behind you.
Thank you. Bring my glasses, did you? There it is. Okay, so it's planned to be in the central row of parking out front. Sorry, the plans are really small. I apologize. We might be able to, is it possible to display that map, Curtis? I'm going to grab my glasses too.
One of the attachments in the memo, if that helps.
While we're waiting, I have to say that so this is how you know when you are getting older is instead of having fun stuff laying all over in various locations, all of us up in the executive team, we have pink glasses and purple glasses and we don't even claim them anymore. We just share them among ourselves so that everybody can, we'll have to bring some down on the podium for future reference.
Okay, so, and just to confirm, these are level 2 chargers. They're not the level 3 higher voltage chargers. That's for slow charging. And it's in the middle row of parking just east of the center here in this building. As you can maybe see it on the diagram, it is pretty small up there. But it is not just staff who have cited the chargers. We've been working with professionals who do this.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? Any online? No? Seeing none? All right. Before asking for a motion, I want to remind everyone that item 6B contains an intergovernmental agreement which requires 2/3 approval of council. Is there a motion by council that the recommendations contained in the staff reports for the consent items be approved? Councilmember Nguyen.
I make this motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Nope. Okay. So since we have a hybrid council tonight, in-person council, please cast your vote electronically. All right, thank you for that. Councilmember Marshallson, please state your vote verbally.
I vote yes, but I also want to note that the motion is incorrect on the screen.
It's being corrected, but thanks for pointing in that out.
Right.
Councilmember Delgadillo, please state your vote verbally.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward, please state your vote verbally.
Yes.
Thank you. So all council members have entered their vote. And this is the first time I've done a hybrid. The results will now be displayed on the screen, and that passes unanimously. Thank you all. While I sort this new stuff out. All right, moving on. The first item under action items this evening is a public hearing in council's consideration on second and final reading of two proposed ordinances relating to income aligned residential development titled The Grove at Cottonwood. I'll now declare the public hearing open. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Ms. Anna Bertanzetti, Planning Director and Co-Director of Community Development, will introduce us to this and briefly give a description. Ms. Bertanzetti.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem. If I could have the next slide, please. So the application this evening is for a second reading. As was mentioned, it's for a second reading of a right-of-way vacation as well as for the rezoning ordinance. These ordinances are related to a 40-unit income-aligned residential community that's located within the Northmore neighborhood. City Council has previously reviewed and voted on to conditionally approve a PUD plan, a site development plan, and a final plat related to this project. The project area is approximately 1.8 acres in size and currently consists of 4 residential lots as well as a dedicated cul-de-sac. If I could have the next slide. The Brimfield Comprehensive Plan for land use designation for this property is residential, and the proposal is consistent with that designation. Next slide. The right-of-way vacation would vacate an existing public street right-of-way that is not necessary any longer to serve the approved development, the PUD plan, site development plan, and final plat for that 40 units. The approved final plat combined the existing residential lots as well as the cul-de-sac property into one single lot. An easement is provided to allow the adjacent Habitat for Humanity property to access a drive on the east side of their property. The rezoning request will change the property from a low-density R1 designation to a planned unit development district, which allows the creation of a custom zoning district. The standards are then identified within the PUD plan, planned unit development plan, and that PUD plan was previously approved by City Council. So that PUD plan is where it addresses the exact density, the heights, all of those details. And as I mentioned, those were all discussed in detail at the public hearing that was held on January 23rd of this year. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the notice and outreach completed by the applicant as part of this overall project. The applicant has met requirements and has held 2 additional neighborhood meetings regarding their project. All public notice requirements were met. It should be noted that a resident had identified that one of the 3 public notices provided for tonight's meeting included a reference to the cul-de-sac being platted in April of 2026. The correct date was April of 2006. That clerical error will be corrected prior to the final publication of the ordinance. The meeting dates for this evening's meeting were correct in all of those public notices. We actually had 3 notices in the Brimfield Enterprise for tonight's meeting, as well as the mailed notices and the sign on the property. Next slide, please. The Land Use Review Commission reviewed this proposal at their meeting in December and voted unanimously to recommend with 2 conditions. Those conditions are listed on the screen. The applicant provided a copy of the draft Good Neighbor policy, and that was included with the memorandum that was provided on January 23rd. And the applicant did not revise the height of the structures, but it was approved as part of the site development plan previously, as well as the PUD plan, again on January 23rd. On January 23rd of this year, City Council held a public hearing, as I mentioned, concerning the proposal, and it was at that hearing that the conditionally approved the PUD plan, final plat, site development plan, as well as the fee waivers, and City Council also voted to for the rezoning and right-of-way vacation to be published and a second reading scheduled for this evening. So just as a reminder, tonight's action is limited to the rezoning and to the right-of-way vacation. The previously approved PUD plan, final plat, site development plan, and the details associated with those. So the building design, the landscape details, all of those types of site improvement details cannot be changed by the ordinances that are under consideration tonight that are limited just to the rezoning of the property and to the right-of-way vacation. So I just wanted that clarified for the record. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burton-Zetti. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in person. Right, is there a staff? Not in my script if there is. Okay, hold that thought on the public comment. Is there an applicant presentation? Okay, my apologies to the public. It was missed. So let's start with the applicant's presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members, City Manager, staff, and our community. I'm Kristen Heiser, Executive Director of the Broomfield Housing Alliance. Broomfield's housing authority created by City Council to create diverse housing options in our community. I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity to introduce you to the rest of the BHA team, Amanda Ropek, who is our Housing Development Services Manager, and Adriana Shuri, who's a Housing Voucher Program Manager. I get the opportunity to stand up here in front of you, but this work can't be done without them, so I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge them, so thank you. BHA has partnered with Blue Line Development to co-develop and co-own the Grove at Cottonwood. Blue Line will also serve as the property manager. I'm here tonight with Jesus Bendezu from Caddis Collaborative, the designer and architect of the Grove. We're back this evening specifically requesting a rezoning of this site and vacation of the right-of-way because there is not currently an existing zoning district in code that allows us to achieve the outcome and vision we strive to deliver, which is 100% income-aligned, neurodiverse, service-enriched community offering a neighborhood feel. Since we've made 2 previous presentations to council about this development, we have abbreviated our presentation this evening, and we'll be happy to answer questions following. Next slide, please. One of the first in Colorado, the Grove at Cottonwood is designed specifically to be an affordable, independent living community serving a neurodiverse population. While available to all neuro abilities, the community prioritizes the needs of our neighbors with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or IDD, who are in critical need of long-term, affordable, stable housing where they can live, age in place, and thrive in our community. The vision and design of the Grove is grounded in the values of integration and connection, rather than concentration, segregation, and exclusion. To be most efficient with the land and meet the housing needs of our community and generate the operating income necessary to provide the services to support the residents, it has been objectively determined that the site can yield up to 40 units of multifamily housing. Next slide, please. The Grove is thoughtfully designed to connect the property with the existing public walkways and the park to the west, maintaining the neighborhood connectivity. More than 50% of the site is maintained as usable open space for the residents. To complement the neighborhood, the buildings are designed at residential scale, offering a neighborhood feel rather than one large apartment building surrounded by a sea of parking. Material selection is reflective of the surrounding homes. We intentionally stepped up the density of the site with the placement of lower height buildings matching the adjacent single-family residential properties to the east and the north, with the taller buildings stepping up to be consistent with the existing Glory home. We will maintain existing vegetation and will add new landscaping, including native plants and pollinators to buffer and break up sight lines between properties. As for parking, the site exceeds the updated parking code by 9 vehicle stalls, and bike parking also exceeds the updated code requirements. Regarding traffic, a formal study was conducted by a third party, which determined the existing streets are adequate to handle proposed traffic flow generated by the proposed development. Next slide, please. My last slide. As for community safety and well-being, the safety of the residents of the Grove and the surrounding community is of utmost importance to us. The Grove will have a tenant selection plan, ensuring the tenants are chosen for occupancy in accordance with federal requirements, including fair housing. Applicant screening will include a criminal background check and a search of the sex offender registry. Per the Broomfield Code, the Grove will codify a good neighbor policy that will commit to maintain a peaceful, safe, and beautiful neighborhood for all, and establish and keep an open line of communication between neighbors to help each other address concerns and solve problems. BHA and Blue Line are committed to establishing a mutually respectful and beneficial relationship with our neighbors in Northmore to ensure the community continues to offer a great quality of life for all to enjoy and thrive. Thank you for the opportunity to share the vision and plans for the Grove of Cottonwood again. We are grateful for the previous support we've received from the City Council and members of our community, and we commit to create a community that truly meets the needs of our future residents and to continue to work with the neighborhood to ensure the Grove is embraced by and contributes positively to the surrounding neighborhood. We are happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies again to our residents who came to speak. So now's the time. If you would like to comment on this item, please come up to the podium. You can form a line, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Good evening. My name is Bernadette O'Keefe. I live in Northmore Estates. Thank you for the opportunity to correct some misinformation that the council shared during their comments a few weeks ago. Several of you spoke to the need for the Northmore Estates community to get with the times and realize this was an advancement for our community. However, not a single individual indicated that we were not in support of low-income housing or housing supporting individuals with developmental disabilities moving into our neighborhood. We simply said that we feel there are large considerations that need to be addressed before this project moves forward. There are concerns about the traffic, which council stated would be addressed in the future, but no one has committed to when and what would happen if the results were not satisfactory. There are concerns about the sidewalk width, which council has indicated will be addressed as complaints come in. I believe that at least one complaint has already been filed. So what are you going to do about it? There are concerns that every presentation that the developer has made has reflected a different product and intent. It started with transitional housing, changed to those with developmental disabilities, and then in the latest presentation, small families. There are also concerns that the Land Review Committee recommended not giving them the zoning waiver to expand to a 3-story buildings, yet council has so far ignored that recommendation. Council's comments at the last meeting stated that since the Glory House also was at the same height, it was fine. However, what has been glossed over by the developer and by council's own comments are that the Glory House is only at that height at the pitch of the roof, which then dramatically drops off. But the developer has the entire height of the entire building at 35 feet. I urge council to deny the rezoning request. Council has indicated they are looking out for the safety of the individuals with developmental disabilities and ensuring low-income housing in Broomfield. How about looking out for the kids that live there and making sure they are safe as well? Let's do a traffic study, ensure the sidewalks are adequate, and keep it safe for everyone. Please do not approve this rezoning request until your decision can be an informed one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Betsy Kessler, and I am also a resident of Northmore Estates. I realize that nothing said here tonight is going to change your minds about the approval of this development. However, I think it's important to point out some realities that you are drastically overlooking, other than the obvious terrible placement of this project. The project is advertised and marketed to be inclusive for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, IDDs. It is also being touted as partially low-income housing. I would first like to discuss the idea of 25% of the units being set aside for people with IDDs. Let it be known, loud and clear, this is not an accessible neighborhood. I wish it were, but it is not. The sidewalks are barely wide enough, and in some cases not wide enough to meet the standards set by ADA, which was passed into law over 3 decades ago and is pathetically outdated. As a person that does not require mobility assistance, I often find myself walking in the street because the sidewalks are so narrow and unpredictable. I can barely walk on the sidewalks with my children or my dogs, and none of us are in wheelchairs or use any type of visual assistance device. It seems like thus far, we have only heard from the intellectual disability community. This feels incredibly discriminatory against people with physical disabilities. You cannot commit to providing 25% of a housing development for one group of people with one type of disability while simultaneously ostracizing another group of people with different types of disabilities. And if you cannot see the irony in that, I suggest you do some research into House Bill HB 231302. Now, in terms of the goal of affordable housing, many of you ran for city council on the platform of creating affordable housing. So I can see why this development would be very attractive to you. You can check that box, go back to your constituents and say, see, I did it. But let's take a step back. Affordable housing is for those who are not earning enough to afford the basic cost of living. So what you're saying is, we understand you can't afford the cost of living. So we're building a place you can afford. However, you will need to be able to afford your own vehicle because there is absolutely no public transportation or employment opportunities within miles of where you live. Using a rideshare app from my house in Northmore Estates to King Soopers costs $10 each way. And if you can't see the irony in that, then I suggest you check your privilege. 40 units and 54 parking spots. You must see that that is not enough parking. Where are the extra cars going to park? Along 14th, in the parking lot used for Northmore Park and Balswan parents to use that parking lot for school pickup and drop off? There is a reason that this land was zoned as low density residential. There just isn't the space for development of this size in this space. Ward 2, on the other hand, has both public transportation and employment opportunities, so I suggest looking there for better placement. Both of these targeted groups will require both of these necessities. You are not creating an accessible and inclusive environment. You are creating an accessible housing development within an inaccessible community, and that is not inclusion, that is segregation. The vast majority of council members here do not live in Northmore Estates, so I would encourage a field trip to this area during peak commute times. Walk the sidewalks of the whole neighborhood, not just around the park. Think about how you would get around if you didn't have a car. And don't make rash decisions based on cheap land and checking political boxes. Ask more questions and get more answers.
Thank you.
I'm back. Hi, Council. It's Peter Kraus from Eagle Trace North, and I actually lived on 1062 East 16th Avenue, only about 2 blocks from Glory Home for 27 years. And I'm here to express support for this change in zoning. I think that particularly having had a son with Down syndrome who lived to 19 months, I know as a parent, that would have been highly concerning to me as I got to where I was going to pass, what was going to happen with my kid. And to know that our citizens are looking forward to those people and their parents and what their life is going to become when their parents pass away, it makes me feel pleased. So council, know that as a former resident of Northmore Park, while this might not make everybody pleased to see this development there, I'm pleased to hear about it.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jordan Hosel, and I am a resident of Northmore Estates. Similar to the last meeting, I'm going to focus on the not inclusive IDD part of this inclusive development. I think the wording from BHA was it is integration and connection. And ironically, there was a picture of somebody in a wheelchair in the presentation, but they can't actually leave the property lines. So I think that's very important to consider. Last meeting, it was asked by Councilmember Lynn if they felt that BHA had done their due diligence in checking the outside of the property lines for accessibility. And they said that, yes, they felt that they had. If they didn't know until last meeting, which I watched them look at each other and say, is that true? When somebody said that they were not ADA compliant sidewalks, concerns me that their standards are that low that they did not know it was not ADA accessible beyond the property lines. It is clear by your yes vote from the last meeting that the lack of safe sidewalks is not important to you. Several council members stated these issues could be addressed later. Considering the sidewalks in our neighborhood are not in the CIP plan for 5 years or beyond, later may as well be never. A quick story about later. Every year, parents for Birch students complain about the crosswalk at 10th and Birch. And every year the city tells us, we'll fix it later, we'll fix it later, we'll fix it later. 9 years. 9 years, and it wasn't until a child got hit by a car that the city came in and started looking at how they could address it. They haven't done any construction, but they have started a plan for how they're going to fix those sidewalks and the cross and intersection. We are not out here because we don't want people with IDD in our community. We are out here because we want people with IDD in our community who can be in our community, who can go outside the property lines and live like any other resident in Northmore Estates. I am sharing this not because I don't want people with IDD in the community. I am a passionate advocate. I work every day in disability advocacy. And you are doing no service to the IDD community by approving this neighborhood without forcing the developer to fix the sidewalks, to put in crosswalks that are for visually impaired people, and to bring the development up so that they can actually live in an integrated community and interact with those that are outside of this single complex. Seattle, LA, Baltimore, I could list 10, 20 cities that have been sued and lost for non-compliant sidewalks and accessibility. I can tell you the city has received a demand letter asking for the sidewalks to be brought up to code. And I can tell you that the legal action by these parents and by the residents of Northmore Estates is not because we do not want people with IDD in our neighborhood. It is because we believe that they should be able to live like any other resident. And I am not going to sit here as a proud citizen of Broomfield and watch you build a segregated community and call it inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Dale Coover. I live in the 1200 block of Cottonwood in Northmore Estates. First off, BHA keeps saying in their presentation, we want to be a good neighbor. We're going to notify you. I've been to 4 of these meetings. I have submitted my name, my mail address, my email address, and I've never received a blue card that said, hey, we're having a meeting. I have a friend here that received 2 of them today, but I've never received one. So trying to keep the community informed, BHA is not doing that. The next part here is I am not against the development of moderate, low-income IDD housing. It's the scale and the scope of what you're trying to do here. 56 parking spaces. That's the minimum amount of cars that will probably be leaving this place twice a day. You have to come in on 13th Street from Sheridan, or you come down Dexter Street, or you come in on Aspen Street. You're funneling all these cars through residential neighborhood. We don't have an HOA. I don't know how many of you live in an HOA. If you do, you've got a get out of jail free card, because your lawyers in your HOA aren't going to let this kind of development happen in your neighborhood. You're building an enclave. You're not building something that where people can assimilate and become part of the neighborhood. The access is just ridiculous. That's what I have to say. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Carolyn Villa. I live a couple of blocks away from Northmore on Dexter Street. So I want to recap. So at this point, council has not included the recommendations of the Land Use Review Commission. Council has not addressed the traffic concerns of residents. Council has not addressed safe street crossings, especially for disabled individuals. Council has not taken any action toward walkability of the neighborhood. Council has not addressed transportation for disabled and low-income persons from this area. Council has not addressed repeated concerns of Northmore residents about the lack of transparency and apparently deceitful practices of the developer to date. At the risk of being flippant, I'll note that the council has addressed their own campaign promises, the desire to show other communities what a great idea this is, the reason why residents need to get with the times, and that the residents just don't want to lose their view of the mountains, which you can't actually see in Northmore because the houses are capped at 2 stories. So council says they want to show how this is a working model, and they want to give a proof of concept. So developments like these can happen all over Broomfield, even in your own neighborhoods. I think many of us would like that very much. I think a successful project here satisfies everyone. But if you really want it to succeed, to show people how it can work, you need to address the concerns that residents have been bringing forth since the very first mention of this project. But if you it's much easier to vilify neighborhood residents who brought concerns forward than to do the actual work of solutions. If you really want it to work, you really want it to be a success, then you need to address the neighborhood concerns. To the parents of IDD individuals who've gotten up here at times and may still come up tonight, I would say that the residents, and they tend to say that the residents don't want this. They don't want disabled people in their neighborhood. And in all the meetings that I've attended, that has not been what I've heard at all. What I've heard over and over are the pleas of neighborhood residents to address their concerns, be forthcoming and honest about what this development will look like and who it will serve. Something that benefits everyone here, except maybe the developer. I don't have a problem with IDD people, with these people's children finding a home in my neighborhood. I welcome them, but I do have valid and unaddressed concerns about my own children being able to move through the neighborhood safely. And in order for this project to truly be successful, the council needs to address those problems. You need to do the work of addressing them. So I ask council, where is the traffic solution in this plan? Where is the walkability solution in this plan? Where are the lighted crosswalks, speed bumps, and transportation solutions? And before you say, like was said in the last meeting, that we can figure that stuff out, remember that you haven't figured it out yet. In fact, you haven't told anybody to figure it out. And the people of the neighborhood will start forming and sharing their opinions on the success or failure of this project the moment it begins, not at some future point when you all get around to dealing with it. The concerns of the neighborhood residents need to be addressed before approval, and holding us all hostage to the funding deadline is underhanded and arbitrary.
Can you please wrap
And
up
speaks
your,
volume about the poor planning thus far. First, work out the issues, then grant approval, not the other way around. That's the only way for this to actually truly succeed and show neighborhoods how it can be done.
thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Sue Myers and I live in Superior. So as a non-resident, I wanted to make sure I went last. However, I am at 68. I am one of the almost 2,000 aging caregivers who live in Boulder and Broomfield County that takes care of an adult child with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our biggest fear is who will look after our children when we're no longer able to. The beauty of the Grove at Cottonwood is that it is organized so that it offers affordable housing and yet supports that this community needs in order to thrive and in order to live independent from family members. Interestingly, my son David lived at Glory Community. He lived there for 5 years in that neighborhood. He loved the neighborhood. He got around very well. He had help getting to bus stops. Most of the people, like my son David with IDD, don't drive. There's not going to be a lot of cars. They will use Uber app. They will use public transportation. They're pretty good at figuring out how to get around. What they do need, however, is they need help. They need ongoing support. The beauty, like I said, of the Grove is that it offers a community within a community. They're not going to be isolated there. They're going to be involved in a very vibrant community within the complex, but yet have access to the outside community. In addition to being the parent and aging caregiver of my son, I am also on the housing subcommittee of the ACL. The ACL, or Association for Community Living, is the ARC chapter of Boulder and Broomfield counties. It's an advocacy group that offers support and voice to people with IDD. The ACL is excited to support the Grove as one of the first models for supportive, inclusive housing in Boulder and Broomfield counties. Thank you to the Broomfield Housing Alliance, the Broomfield City Council, and the City of Broomfield for embracing this opportunity to fill a critical need and provide housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Thank you. We have one caller on the phone, so we will go to the caller, and it is Tia. Tia, you're live. Oh, sorry, Rebecca.
Hello, my name is Rebecca. And Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am a Broomfield resident with both IDD and disabilities, and I am calling in support of the Cottonwood Grove. And like the speaker before me, I'm also involved in the ACL, and I'm also involved in Self Advocates Becoming Empowered. I really believe that this community will allow people with both IDD and disabilities to obtain not only the friendship they need, but access to the community and a sense of pride in being able to live independently. And I really honestly think that, yes, we need to do a better job of making Broomfield accessible, but I want to see this flourish because so many of my friends are so excited and proud to be able to be independent, which is something that most people with IDD and disabilities don't always get an opportunity to do. So I believe this complex will assist in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to speak on this before we move on? Please come up to the podium.
I'm Patty Tillotson. I live in Northmore Estates. I'm very happy about the IDD people having a place to live. And the other one, I thought it was going to be all for that, but now I hear that it's only 25%. So I'd like to hear something about what's going to happen to the other 30 affordable housing, who's going to qualify for that, what it's going to involve as far as working poor. Are there going to be Broomfield people who are homeless, working poor, given priority? It's becoming more of a problem, and I'd like to hear more about that.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to be heard on this? I'll give the applicant a chance to address that last question. If no, okay. What? If you want to, I think it's been said, but it's good to cover it again.
So 25% of the units, because of the type of funding that we use to achieve this outcome, there are certain restrictions as to how many units we can set aside for a specific population. In order to keep the rents down, we're going to be employing what is called 811 project-based vouchers. And those require that you can only, because they're trying not to perpetuate the concept of concentration or isolation. The idea is not to create a community that is just of one type of person or part of our community. And so the idea is to bring, so we're limited to setting aside 10 of the units specifically for individuals with IDD. The other 30 units, we can rent to individuals with IDD, and we're actually entering into memorandums of understanding with Friends of Broomfield as well as Imagine, who will help us identify individuals who are interested in living independently at the Grove. But because of the limitations, we can't identify those as just set aside specifically for individuals for IDD, but our goal is to have as many individuals with IDD being a part of our community.
Thank you, Ms. Heiser. We will now go to questions from council. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I do have a couple questions, and also I think they're mostly going to be directed to Ms. Bertanzetti. But one additional question that was not in those initial questions I sent to you is there's been a lot of concern about the sidewalks. We received one of the emails recently said there is, and I did not get a chance to go over there and look to see this, but it said that there just isn't the space to widen these sidewalks to 12 feet. Has anyone on staff verified whether or not we can actually widen these sidewalks? And can we make a commitment to actually doing this work? Because we're kind of relying on, along with the crosswalks. That's a question that's a new one. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Anderson, for the question. So I'm not, so the question is specifically for a 12-foot sidewalk, that I would be able to say we have not looked at. 12 feet would be beyond a standard sidewalk.
Or
for-
whatever six.
So, right, I think sometimes we're looking at more of a 6-foot sidewalk. In some areas, we have an 8-foot sidewalk along major roadways, but 4 to 6 is probably more typical for most of Brimfield neighborhoods. I would imagine that there's many areas in Brimfield that are older that have 3-foot sidewalks that are not what we would build in today's subdivisions. We have not done an ADA analysis, if that's what you're asking for, specifically for this particular neighborhood, but there, as was mentioned, there has been a request submitted and we will be working through that request. Funding for sidewalk expansion would need to be done through the capital projects and through the budgeting. So it's not something that staff would be able to commit to this evening, since that does have to go through a formal process and be considered as part of the budget.
Okay, thank you. And then this is just kind of just quickly, if you can go over, as we move forward in this next step, there was some questions submitted about what happens, because this is reliant on federal funding, and concerns from the community that what happens to this property if that funding doesn't come through. And can you just touch really quickly on what's actually written in the SDP and the.
Sure. So the question was really, what happens if BHA, for some reason, decided not to move forward with this project and decided to sell it to an unknown third party? And the answer is that that third party would still be purchasing the property with all of these commitments in place. There is a memorandum of understanding, there's a subdivision improvement agreement, there's the PUD plan, the site development plan, and all those site development plan and the PUD plan reference the intent to have this community for an inclusive community targeting IDD individuals, as well as being income aligned. So there's a lot of commitments to how this project would need to move forward. So if they were to sell to a third party, that third party would need to commit to everything that's already been committed to by BHA. If they wanted to make any changes, it would have to go back through a public process. If they wanted to change the type of community, change the densities, change the design, make it so that it wasn't income aligned, things like that would have to go back through a public process, because it's not consistent with what was approved on January 23rd. Even with all of those protections, the Brimfield Municipal Code does have an allowance that if permits are not issued within 3 years of the approval of a site development plan, then there is a potential that City Council could take action to reconsider the site development plan, to revoke the site development plan. It's not that that after 3 years, the site development plan is revoked. Just make sure it's clear, it's not an automatic process, but after 3 years, if permits haven't been issued, then City Council could, through the process outlined in the code, reconsider it and consider a revocation of that site plan.
Okay, thank you. And I think one of the questions was specifically like, we're allowing a certain height, but this would all be renegotiated because you'd want to be removing certain other requirements. So that would all be a discussion for a future council if we got to that point.
So correct. If someone was trying to propose a change to the height, to the density, anything like that, it would require going back through a public process again. That would be a formal amendment to the PUD plan, and potentially the site development plan, could be multiple plans, as well as the memorandum of understanding and the subdivision improvement agreement. All those would likely be changed if the concept of the proposal was being changed.
Okay, thank you. And I think the other ones were really not questions, and there was no way to, there was kind of like is there a way to limit the number of individuals in this? Maybe you can touch on that really quickly too, is like, originally we thought maybe it was just one per, it was based on square footage, but some of the upcoming legislation potentially, and if you could just touch on really quickly the number of people that could potentially live there.
So there isn't a code requirement specific to multifamily housing that says in any way Brimfield can regulate who lives in an apartment. So that's the same whether that is this particular project or any apartment development in Brimfield. We don't monitor the occupancy of those units. There is, in addition to that, there's actually a bill proceeding through the House right now that would make it so that no local governments could put any type of occupancy limitation on single family or multifamily housing. And that would, except for in group living quarters, which was mentioned. So like the Glory Communities was a group living home. And so there are limitations on the number of people that can be housed within a group living facility. And that's important for Brimfield. We're pushing for that to be incorporated into the bill. But if that bill were to be passed, it actually would have negated any condition that could have been added by city council at the time of the site development plan or PUD plan. If there was something that had been added, it would have been negated by that bill when it goes into effect if it were to be approved this year.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question was related to, I was looking at ways we could run amendments to try to limit anything, make anything better, and everything kind of came up at a dead end. But the other one was the parking and considerations of what happens, because we don't know what's going to happen. There could be adverse effects from trying to do something. And if you want to address the parking at all, then that'd be
Sure.
the question.
The question was, is it possible to condition to address like a permit parking requirement? And as you mentioned, that really would have been more appropriate with the PUD plan or the site development plan. It's not really something that we would apply to a rezoning or a right-of-way vacation. But I did mention that in my response that permit parking can have some unintended consequences. And we've run into this in some of our other communities where developers will limit parking to say, oh, you can only have one vehicle space per unit on the site. And what we find is not everybody has a vehicle, so there might still be available spaces on the site, but it really pushes people who do have more than one to always have to park off site. And it can create some unintended consequences. And I just wanted to make you aware of that. That is something that we've run into other places where we've tried to attempt that. But again, there is no permit parking requirement here. Brimfield does have a neighborhood permit parking ordinance that is in effect for communities or neighborhoods that are in close proximity to a public elementary, high school, middle school, junior high, as well as project properties that are near here with the Brimfield Town Square development. And in those areas, if there is an adverse impact from, say, pickup drop-off from an elementary school, a block by block basis, the residents on those blocks can request permit parking for their properties. And if at some point in the future there were to be adverse impacts that are not expected this time, but adverse impacts from this or any future development, it is possible for city council to reconsider that ordinance and to amend it to include additional areas, as was done for Brimfield Town Square. The neighborhood wouldn't automatically become permit parking restricted because it would still have to be that the residents on those blocks would have to request the permit parking to be applicable to their properties. It's a lot of P words there, so hopefully came through.
Yep, thank you. And I'll save my comments. Those are all my questions.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions from council? Councilmember Lim?
One of the residents questioned the lack of transportation, and that was a concern that I had with the last, when we spoke last, at the last meeting. Could the applicant address what the applicant is moving forward with transportation?
Thank you for the opportunity to clarify. First of all, we are purchasing a van that will be available on site and be available to residents to use to access jobs, services, going to the grocery store, that sort of thing. We will be employing what we call a resident concierge, who will help residents navigate their transportation needs. So we'll have a staff member located on site that will be helping individuals schedule with that van. They will also be helping them navigate whether it's the car share services such as Uber, Lyft, all those, as well as accessing the RTD, Access-a-Ride, and all those types of public services that are currently available. So in addition to having a van on site that we will have available with a driver to help people access the services in the community, we will have that individual who one of their primary roles is going to be helping residents navigate to where they need to be.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Last call. Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. There are two items related to this project that council will vote on this evening. The first is an ordinance on rezoning and the second is an ordinance to vacate a roadway right away. First is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2228 on second and final reading. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2228, rezoning land at 1347 Cottonwood Street, 1354 Cottonwood Street, 1377 Cottonwood Street, and 1394 Cottonwood Street from R1 to PUD. Public hearing and second reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that resolution number 2228 be adopted on second and final reading and order published.
Is there a second? Councilmember Nguyen? Thank you. Is there any discussion? Buttons. Light up. Did Councilmember Anderson? No, no discussion? Oh, okay. Any other discussion from council? Last call? Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2228. In-person council, please cast your vote electronically. Councilmember Marsh Holston, please state your vote verbally.
Yes.
Councilmember Delgadillo, please state your vote verbally.
Yes.
Councilmember Ward, please state your vote verbally.
I vote yes.
Thank you. The results will now be displayed on screen and that passes 8-1. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2229. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2229, vacating the right-of-way of a cul-de-sac south of East 14th Avenue within the Northmore Estates subdivision. Public hearing and first reading.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there a motion, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that resolution number 2229 be adopted on second and final reading and ordered published.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Nguyen. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask our attorney, when I said published, is that just published by title or is that published in full? Just wanted to make that clarification.
Published by title, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Any other discussion? All right. I'll count. That was discussion. And then all council members have entered their, no, we have to do the vote. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2229. In-person council, please cast your vote electronically. Councilmember Marsh Holston, please state your vote verbally.
Yes.
Councilmember Delgadillo, please state your vote verbally.
Yes.
And Councilmember Ward, please state your vote verbally.
I vote yes.
Thank you. All council members have entered their vote. The results will now be displayed on the screen, and that passes 8-1. Thank you all very much. We can take a little intermission and let people leave if they want before we move on to the next and final item of the agenda. So we'll take a 10-minute recess. We'll take our 8 p.m. break early. We'll be back at 7:50. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to continue on with our meeting. If you'd like to take your seats or take it out in the hallway, that works too. Thank you. So our final item under action items this evening is the public hearing and council's consideration on second and final reading of 4 proposed ordinances relating to Broomfield's boards and commissions. I'll now declare the public hearing open. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
I don't have my glasses on this evening, so thank you for standing up, Crystal. I wouldn't have seen you all the way over there.
You're welcome.
Krista Clemens, our city and county clerk, and Joel Heine is also there as backup. Please introduce us to this item and walk us through it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. This evening, we're here to present 4 proposed ordinances for your consideration tonight. The first ordinance, 2211, amends sections of the Broomfield Municipal Code relating to boards and commissions. The ordinance removes city council member positions from all boards and commissions except the Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability. The ordinance consolidates the rules frequently repeated in each chapter for each board and commission into one extended chapter. It applies the rules and definitions uniformly, clarifies youth positions and alternate positions, and allows for the appointment of a second alternate. On the second alternate, if passed tonight, staff would recommend the appointment of the second alternate during council's appointments in March. This will help to ensure a quorum for all our boards. The next slide, please. Proposed ordinance 2225 amends sections of code relating to the Board of Equalization. The ordinance establishes the City Council as the Board of Equalization. The language from the Broomfield specific sections regarding additional qualifications for arbitrators and settlement authority, originally enacted in 2001 and 2002, respectively, continues to be included in this reenactment of Chapter 2-66. Next slide, please. Ordinance 2226 amends sections of code relating to the local licensing authority. The ordinance eliminates the local licensing authority as the board or commission appointed by city council and instead authorizes a hearing officer to serve as the local licensing authority. The hearing officer created by this ordinance will be chosen annually by the city clerk. The city clerk will continue to serve as the official secretary for the local licensing authority. It also grants the local licensing authority the power to temporarily suspend licenses for not more than 15 days prior to holding a hearing if the local licensing authority has reason to believe that a deliberate law violation has or is taking place, and the violation is detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare. Next slide, please. The ordinance delegates certain licensing actions to the city clerk that the local licensing authority had previously delegated to the city clerk through its rules of procedure. This includes renewing licenses with no violations and approving applications relating to the change of manner or corporate structure, and new authority to the city clerk to approve transfer of ownership applications for alcohol beverage licenses and to approve bed and breakfast and the newly renamed retail establishment permit. Next slide, please. The ordinance also the city attorney will represent Broomfield in contested hearings and will represent Broomfield and the local licensing authority should a decision be appealed to the district court. Next slide, please. And the last ordinance is 2227. It amends sections of code to transfer ambulance and retail food licensing hearings from the local licensing authority to the Board of Health. Staff are making this recommendation due to the specialized nature of these licenses, and should a hearing for retail food, restaurant, or ambulance license be necessary, the Board of Health will be in a better position to hear the issue than the local licensing authority. And this concludes our presentation this evening, and Joel and I are available for questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clemens. We'll now proceed with public comment, starting with in-person. If anyone would like to be heard, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hello, Council. Peter Kraus. I'm a resident of Eagle Trace North, and forgive me if this has already been covered. The Board of Equalization, if I'm not mistaken, is where property tax protests occur. Am I correct in that? So that would mean that we would not have a Board of Equalization that's manned by the citizens, but we'd be manned by council. Is that correct? Is that what I just saw?
Ms. Clemens, can you clarify?
Yes, the Board of Equalization would be the council. We would still have hearing officers, though, that hear the actual protest.
I think if I can jump in, Mayor, I think a good way to look at it is this is a delegated duty. Council would not be sitting as an appellate body to that hearing officer. Council would be delegating its hearing officer's responsibility to that hearing officer. And then you would look at those decisions, not as an appellate body, just as sort of a quick review, and then move those forward, and then they can be appealed. This is how a lot of counties set it up, where they delegate the hearing, having the hearing to a hearing officer.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers.
So if it's, I'm kind of curious what the justification for pulling it out of citizen hands and putting it into a situation where you have a hearing officer and then you have council either essentially rubber stamping or rejecting the hearing officer's decision. If I'm hearing that correctly, I'm kind of wondering what the justification for that is. It seems a little bit to me, for lack of a better term, the fox guarding the hen house. And I intuitively I'm concerned about such an arrangement.
Ms. Rogers, haven't they switched to a hearing officer already?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. We already use a hearing officer. The resident appointed board already uses a hearing officer. That model's been in place. I'll have to look, but it's been for more than a year.
That's what I thought. Thank you very much. Anyone else like to be heard on these items? Please come up to the podium.
Good evening again, Win Eberhard, living in Gayton Green. Could you explain what it means that the city council no longer be members of the city of the boards and commissions? My experience was many years ago with Parks and Recreation Committee with John Ferraro as Parks and Recreation Director. Randy Aarons was the city council member, and that relationship was very strong and very fruitful and helpful. So does this mean the city council members will not really be interacting with boards and commissions in a personal way?
Not on the local boards. We still have other boards and commissions that we serve on, but these ones that are.
Oh, so this is referring to boards and commissions that are like intergovernmental?
Yes.
Oh, okay, but not to our cemetery committee and those kinds of things, right?
Well, the cemetery committee was rolled into the Parks and Rec.
Oh, okay. Well, I
So
wasn't aware
we've
of
done a
that.
lot of consolidation and modernization
Mhm.
over the last few years because there were 42 or upwards of 50 different boards that we were required to serve on between being the city and the county. And quite honestly, it became a full-time job. just
Okay,
to
so
serve
so
on
you
these
still
boards.
have council members who are volunteered for or assigned to each of those boards or commissions, is that right? And to interact with them?
Not the ones that were
I'm not,
removing.
okay, but I'm saying locally. That still is true for
No.
cemetery and parks and recreation?
No, just the advisory committee on environmental sustainability.
Okay, so how do they communicate?
They report back to us
And how is that done?
in their minutes and some of the larger ones will be making presentations like open space and trails when they're working on projects.
Yeah.
Give us quarterly reports.
Okay. Well, I must comment, I find that unfortunate because my experience was that personal contact really made things work. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone else like to be heard? All right, then next is questions from council. We didn't have anybody online, right? Okay, so any questions from council? No? Anybody online? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. So do have a question for staff regarding the local licensing authority. So this was a question out from a resident. With the removal of the committee, it institutes a hearing officer. And you had mentioned that there were other communities that have instituted a hearing officer. Can you name some of those other communities that have instituted this model?
Can you give us a second? on
Yes,
that?
of course.
Thanks.
And I guess I'll just clarify. So the question that we had during public comment is that I believe it's with the first ordinance. This would remove council members from being a ex officio member of those local boards and commissions, such as Parks and Rec, Open Space and Trails, Cemetery Committee, et cetera. Is that correct?
I apologize. I was in depth looking at the first response. Could you repeat your
Yeah,
question?
I was trying to give you some time.
Sorry.
I'm sorry about that. During the public comment, we just wanted to clarify the first ordinance is the removal of the council members as ex officio members from those local boards and commissions. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's Parks and Recreation, Open Space, Cemetery Community, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
Great. Thank you for that.
And city, I believe, Arvada.
Jill, do you want to take that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
List of cities, Lakewood, Golden, Commerce City. I remember Telluride's on the list, Avon.
Mr. Heine, let's,
Laura,
yeah.
and
So
we have it's a long list. The majority of the cities in the metro area and some in the mountains areas use a hearing officer for licensing. So the ones that have marijuana might use it also for marijuana. Counties, we see a little bit of a different thing. Douglas County tried a hearing officer for a while, just reverted back to using their board of county commissioners, not a board, not an appointed board. But counties are a different animal, and they don't have the number of licenses that a lot of our cities do. A lot of the cities do a lot more licensing than the counties because it's only the unincorporated areas. But Golden, Lafayette, Lakewood, Federal Heights, Denver, Commerce City, Colorado Springs, Centennial, Brighton, Arvada is in the same process we are. Loveland and Erie use their municipal judge. Superior and Platteville have a board of trustees doing it, but they're much smaller.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, staff.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. So this is kind of in response to that same question. It is unfortunate that we lose some of the communication that we have when we sat on the boards, but we were not voting members on those boards. And there's nothing, just to clarify, staff, there's nothing that precludes us from attending a meeting. Is that correct? We could still, if there's something of importance, there's nothing that would preclude a member of the board from reaching out to us and saying this is of interest, or they communicate with us in any way. And then we had the discussion, and forgive me for this because I don't remember the details, but we had the discussion that we were going to have some of the boards come in on a regular basis. That's not required by the board, but that will develop over time. I forget exactly the discussion we had there. So we're not going to lose contact with these boards, I guess, it is the part that I want to make sure we're clear on.
that's correct. So throughout the year, those boards will come and provide a presentation during a workshop setting so that we and council and through each one of these budget decisions, council still has the feedback from those boards. in each one of these council memos that we have that, that go back and forth. So as far as a meet and greet and kind of that high level from the balcony, that'll be throughout 2024 from each one of those.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? Not seeing any. There being no further questions, the public hearing is closed. There are 4 ordinances related to this item that council will vote on this evening. First is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2211 on second and final reading. Will the clerk please read the proposed resolution by title?
Ordinance number 2211, amending certain sections of the Broomfield Municipal Code regarding boards and commissions. Public hearing and second reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that resolution number 2211 be adopted on second and final reading and order published by title.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Nguyen?
I second this motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not seeing any. Oh, Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to take a moment, since I have served on LLA for the last 2 years, and I don't know if Councilmember Marsh Folsom is still here, but I think he served longer. I appreciate that we're moving to a model that most other communities are using primarily for efficiency, because the LLA met once a month, and that, I understand, created some delay for local businesses wanting to get their licenses approved. But I just want to take a moment to thank the people who have been serving on LLA. I've certainly witnessed that the folks serving on there have been very diligent in reading the reports, reading the applications. I've seen them find errors or things that weren't true reported on applications. I've seen them done a very good job of quizzing applicants, particularly those who had violated liquor laws, and expressing the will of the community and the importance of them getting their employees trained and protecting particularly the youth of our community. So in some ways, I'm sad to see LA go, but I appreciate why. But I just wanted to thank the people who have served. This isn't a reflection of their service, but I appreciate it reflects the way other communities are going and are having success in terms of efficiency and executing these permits and applications. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor. My comments are pretty brief. Obviously, like Councilman Cohen had mentioned, I want to thank all the volunteers who are part of our boards and commissions. Obviously, the boards and commissions are the lifeblood of our community. They're volunteers. And as a former member of, one of these boards and commissions, I feel like these changes are critical, especially as we continue to move from the post-COVID world, just because these changes I was a board member from 2019 to 2023. I feel like a lot of these changes creates expediency. A lot of boards, commissions wait for council's, favor or information. And sometimes I feel like that this will create more autonomy, more accountability, and hopefully more wiggle room for both staff and for our volunteers in these boards commissions to operate freely and hopefully more efficiently. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
Yes, I wanted to echo in similar lines to what Councilmember Cohen said. I served on the Board of Equalization, and there were dedicated individuals who had served on that board for a number of years, who took their oversight of that board seriously, and we want to thank them. In that respect too, I asked quite a few questions of staff about this Cincy City Council taking over the Board of Equalization, and they were able to address my questions. So I thank you for that, staff.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the comment from the public concerning the removal of council members from the local boards and commissions. I think this is definitely something I've thought about for the last at least 8 years now, during my time on council, as well as my time when I was on a board and commission here locally in Broomfield. I think it's one of those extra duties that council members serve in, but more of an individual state. With the council members being removed from these local boards, it means the information is going to the full board. board of the council, which is important that that each person on council gets that amount of advice from those boards and commissions, that they have those full report, that they understand these at that level, and in order to ensure that there is proper policy that is created or proper policy that is implemented based upon those conversations. So, I really do think that it's important. I think that what we're going to find is much more robust conversations around these topics because more council members will be involved. We'll also have additional opportunities for community members that are on those local boards and commissions to interact with council as well. We'll extend, another evening social that we'll have, as well as the in-person reports and things like that from the boards and commissions. So I believe that we'll continue to have an increased connection with them as an entire council. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other discussion from council? All right, seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2211. Never mind. Oh, okay, yes, thank you for that. In-person council, please cast your vote electronically. Councilmember Delgadillo, please state your vote verbally.
Yes.
Councilmember Ward, please state your vote verbally.
I vote yes.
All council members have entered their vote. And the results will now be displayed on the screen. And that passes 8-0. Come up yet? The delay? What happened? Okay, it worked. Thank you very much. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2225. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2225, amending sections of the Broomfield Municipal Code relating to the Board of Equalization.
Thank you. Is there a motion, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that ordinance number 2225 be adopted on second and final reading and order published by title.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Wynn?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2225. In-person council, please cast your vote electronically. Councilmember Delgadillo, please state your vote verbally.
Yes.
Councilmember Ward, please state your vote verbally.
Vote yes.
Thank you. All council members have entered their vote. And the results will be displayed on the screen, and that passes 8-0. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2226. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2226, amending sections of the Broomfield Municipal Code relating to the local licensing authority.
Thank you. Is there a motion, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that ordinance number 2226 be adopted on second and final reading and order published by title.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Wynn?
I second this motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2226. In-person council, please cast your vote electronically. Councilmember Delgadillo, please state your vote verbally.
Yes.
Councilmember Ward, please state your vote verbally.
I vote yes.
Thank you. And all council members have entered their vote. The results will be displayed on the screen, and that also passes 8-0. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2227. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2227, amending sections of the Broomfield Municipal Code to transfer ambulance and retail food licensing hearings from the local licensing authority to the Board of Health.
Thank you. Is there a motion, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that ordinance number 2227 be adopted on second and final reading and order published by title.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Wynn?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance 2227. In-person council, please cast your vote electronically. Councilmember Delgadillo, please state your vote verbally.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward, please state your vote verbally.
And I vote yes.
Thank you. All council members have entered their vote, and the results will now be displayed on screen. That passes 8-0. So thank you all very much for the cleanup and all the work on this to bring us into the future. We'll move on to future action. There are no requests for future action this evening. Is there any other business to come before the council? There being no further business, the council meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.